Welcome back. So, Fenris EE got removed. Player base in shambles. Let's talk about it, man. Because some people still think this thing was a good thing, but hey, I am standing on the grounds that it wasn't, right? Because, first of all, let's start with this, right? When you name a unit like Harsetti in the EE, right? Like, I don't know if I said that in the last videos, but the devs and them are telling you, or the company is telling you, hey, we made this thing too strong. This specific thing that's written here, Harsetti, we're written the thing. We've made this thing too strong, and we don't know. We're running out of ways to efficiently deal with her, right? So why is she hard to deal with? And someone said, okay, before I go further, someone said, if you're having problems with Harsetti, you must be bronze, right? And I want to remind you, those of you who watched the analytics video on the World Arena season, right? Just based on Smage's data, Harsetti has the highest ban rate in Legend. So the Legend players who have better gear, better knowledge, they draft better, they have most of the units. She's the highest ban rate up there still, right? And well, she should have been the highest lower round, but she's actually lower ban rate the lower down you go, right? So before you say it's a bronze stake, whatever, bro. I guess all the legend players are bronze, right? So the thing is, she almost stops everything that would counter her, right? No, her passive, they gave her so you cannot gain combat readiness on her turn. And I know she's supposed to be an anti-cleave unit, right? But they don't want you to cleave with her, right? Because she has a bunch of debuffs. They don't want you to pair. They don't want you to pair. I mean, people still pair Blooming Lidica with her and things like that. But they still pair Blooming Lidica with her because Blooming Lidica's artifact will push the enemy back, allowing your team to kind of get up on top of the Harsetti, right? It gives you skill no, right? They don't want you to do things like that, right? Or they don't want you to like Harsetti Araminta, Harsetti Rowana, and things like that, right? They don't want you to do that. But I want to talk about some of the nerfs that was proposed by the community, right? And then we'll talk about the Fenris, right? My idea was make her a focus unit, right? So that she can't S3 on turn one. She needs full focus, right? That way she's forced to press S1. They say, oh, well, what about the defense break? Well, if you play RTA, all of us who play RTA, you have immunity on pretty much your whole team, right? Unless it's like even some of your high ER units, right? You have immunity on them because if you don't, you're gonna get paired. Player's gonna S3 S1 into you and defense break you and you die, right? So things like that. It stops things like SBA combos with the stuns because he doesn't strip, things like that, right? If you buff stack immunity with Rowana, Rowana strips one buff. So if you're buff stacking with immunity, she only strips one buff, and you keep your immunity, you don't get reset, right? Things like that. So it stops a lot of things, actually, right? It stops a lot of things, and it force activates a lot of things. It can force activate SSB since she's forced S1 into her AOE. She's force proc SSB. Maybe you land some defense breaks. Maybe you do a lot of damage with the drink and her S2, things like that, right? And then you can hold her S3 hostage with like Solitaria. You can slow it down with like Sea Phantom Politis. You can, I mean, if you have like a Lidica, you can resource reduce it to kind of keep her down, right? You can do a lot of things. So, but the main issue is the combat readiness part, right? I think that's what a lot of people are saying. Some people said they should remove the speed RNG, but then people, I mean, if you guys are forgetting, this unit has 124 base speed, right? She has 124 base speed. She is quite fast. So a lot of people will just speed tune their teams to go with her anyways, right? And then yeah, you might have to build your team too, and you might cut in between some of those, but you know, you know. But that's what they don't want, right? They don't want you to cleave with her. That's why they did this. But I think a simple fix too that I've heard, right, is um, make the passive so that it only affects her team, right? That way you can't cleave with her, right? So we say, well, why would that matter? Well, here's why it would matter. And I think they should still do the focus thing where she doesn't S3 turn 1, right? Or she doesn't S3 turn 1. Here's why it matters. Because a unit like this, like Rowana, right? What would happen is Harsetti would either she S1s and AoEs, or she S3s, and Elena will cleanse. I have mine on Doctor's bag, so she cleanses 2 on her S2. But you cleanse basically both of Harsetti's buffs. You push up above the enemy team, right? Because you get CR from this as well. And then you can put up your invincibility, right? Which will protect your team and stuff, right? That would work, right? But it can't because of Harsetti's CR blocking for all the teams, right? Another unit here is actually a 4-star in front of Kawazu, right? If he gets hit by an AoE, he cleanses himself, he pushes up, right? He cleanses himself, he pushes up, he heals himself, and he gives himself vigor, and then he can just blow up somebody with the burns, right? Who else? Things like even if they do they need to do that plus the change that I for this unit to work, right? If they do a thing like where is she at? The queen, right? If they make her they do both those changes, Lionheart would work, right? Because if she's forced to S1, and proc and then AoE and then proc Lionheart gains CR, right? She gains combat readiness, she gets her buffs, she cleanses herself, and then she goes into the S3 and you can probably maybe nuke it out there, right? Things like that would work, but it doesn't, right? Those are counters to that unit. Like when Lionheart came, like for example, when Sea Phantom Politis came out, I always was of the opinion that Lionheart was supposed to be a good counter for her, right? But Lionheart before used to use Fighting Spirit to get her ultimate. So what would happen? She would proc this when Sea Phantom dual attacks, right? But she wouldn't get enough Fighting Spirit to use her skill 3, and then they buffed her so where this doesn't need Fighting Spirit anymore, right? Things like that. Like if they made that change to Harsetti, like there's so much things that would work, right? There's so many things that would work. It's insane, right? So I think that's simple. And then they can even, like I said before, they can even buff her S3. And you say, well, buff her. I mean, if they make those changes, right, they could buff her or S3s. If they make it a focus where you can hold her hostage with Solitaria or Sea Phantom or things like that, then they can make it stronger if they wanted to. You know. Who else? Yeah. If you guys remember, there was somebody who got nerfed recently, right? No, I remember I talked about Hua Young. And this is why I think they could consider nerfing Harsetti, right? Hua Young, like I said, Hua Young was dominating everywhere, right? She was killing everything. Blue units, tank units, squishy units, it didn't matter, right? They tried to, and it's actually so funny actually. Let me guys tell you this, right? Hua Young, the first counter they tried for Hua Young, I believe, was MLT. Well, not MLT, Blue Tayu, right? They tried to counter her with him. That didn't work, right? And then they brought out Elvira, and it didn't work either, right? It didn't work. Well, Hua Young stopped being used on defenses anyway, because you can bait her with Elvira. So you can bait her with not Elvira, Eula. Sorry, you can bait her with Eula, right? On offense. So, and then that still wasn't enough for RTA. Yeah, it helped out in Guild Wars and stuff where you can bait the unit, but That's the same thing here. People are saying, well, she already has these counters. Harsetti already has these counters, but her pre-ban rate kept going up even when Young Senya was introduced, right? In RTA. That's what Spygate is trying to fix, right? So I know people are talking about Arena. No, that's why they're saying she's not an issue, but she is an issue still in RTA, right? Nobody wants to play against her, right? Now, they also introduced for Hua Young a frenzy, right? They introduced a frenzy that they recently removed. We went over that already. That said, if you're attacking into elemental disadvantage, you do 30% less damage, right? And then nothing that works. Tayu didn't work. Eula didn't help. The frenzy didn't help, so they had to nerf her. We're seeing that now with Harsetti, right? We saw Young Senya, that didn't help because her pre-ban rate went up after Young Senya came in, right? Still, right? And then, because what would happen in RTA, right? Like I said that before, what would happen is the Harsetti player would just pick, they would just pick Young Senya first, and then they'll go Harsetti. And what do you do, right? Like you would see a lot of first picks Young Senyas or something, or they would pre-ban it, right? They would pre-ban it and then just go Harsetti. Now, Zio was like one of the better answers to deal with Harsetti, right? Because you can use him and you can use bridges, right? You use him and you can use him with a bridge, right? Unit that would push up like a blade. You can use like a blade. You can use like Jacko. You can use like Silver Blade. You can use Emma Ludwig. You can do a lot of things, right? A lot of bridges with him. Rekra Moana. You can do a lot of things, right? Now, the Fenris EE. The Fenris EE was basically Zio's passive, but only when fighting Harsetti. Alright, and they removed that, which is, I think they should. I think that's fine, right? People are mad about it, but I think that's fine. But what's wrong with making Fenris a general unit? Why didn't they just lower that CR down to 20? Alright, did they want to? And just make it work everywhere. Just make it work generally, not just versus Harsetti. That way, those who don't have Zio, they might just pick up Fenris, right? No, you say, well, they don't want to invalidate Zio. Well, you're wrong because they already done that like 3 times, right? Let me show you what I'm talking about, right? So you guys remember this unit? You remember her? You remember her, right? I mean, you've probably seen her last season a lot, but she was the boss character for episode 1, the first seal unit in the game, right? She was the first seal unit in the game, right? And then people would run her different builds, right? They would run her either just fast for the seals and the procs, and try to cycle to this as fast as possible. Some people will build her on counter. You get you remember in Guild War, she counters you, you get proc, you get Fairy Tale for a nightmare, Fairy Tale, right? And then eventually she gets to this, and then some people will build her on high attack builds where they just try to get up to the S3 and use the burn damage and everything, right? There will be a lot of builds for her, right? So there was that unit. She's the first seal unit. Samage said, well, okay, let's introduce Nakwal, Monk Nakwal, right? She comes in here, extra turn, sober and ignore ER, bind so you can counter, full strip, reset skill cooldowns, and then she was paired with Laya when Laya was all over the place too, so she can just cycle back into this and have no downtime on the S1 pretty much. She cycles into this, which cycles into the S2, which seals, and it seals before it attacks, so your evasion doesn't mean anything because it seals before it touches you, so similar to Aemerius, right? It gives her increased speed as well to make her cycle. Her base speed is faster than actually, is it faster? I didn't check, but and then you can get silence and pushback, right? So she had a lot of tools in her kit, and then they said, well, that's not enough, right? Let's bring out the queen, well, the other queen. Muna, sober and ignore ER, full strip, same thing like Nakwal, unbuffable this time instead of bind, because it's a non-contact skill. It doesn't need it, but AoE seal though, right? AoE seal, and then yeah, obviously she has like her defense, break, splash damage, all of these things, right? So they already did that with Ameru twice, right? And then another character they did that with is Strays, right? We had Strays. All right, skill 3, all right? That's the AoE, right? Attacks all enemies, penetrate defense of the target with the highest max HP, right? And then if the caster's attack is greater than the penetration target, the one with the highest HP, right? Penetration rate increases proportional to the difference up to a maximum of 100%. Right? It gets invincibility and blah, blah, it cannot be countered, right? Who else did they do that with? Well, they did that with where is she? Galililius, right? Gala. So Gala is almost the same thing. A single target this time though. For 2 turns, increase attack in the in a blind spot, increases combat readiness of the caster by 35%. When the target's max health is greater than the caster's, it's HP differential this time, not attack, but pretty much the same thing, right? Penetrates the target's defense. Penetration rate increases up to 100%. It's pretty much the same thing, and then she has like the guaranteed crit and all of that, right? So definitely they have done this with units before. They haven't done it with Bellion yet. They haven't done it with Zio yet. But they were doing it with Fenris, but only versus Harsetti, right? And they haven't done that obviously with Harsetti yet because Harsetti is too broken, and I don't think they're gonna make a RGB version of that. Unless they want to kill the game, right? So what's the issue with making him like a Zio, alright? Make him like a Zio. Just make him general use where he can be used everywhere. He's gonna be using cleave, so what? Right? At least he's gonna be able to. He would have been able to use be against Harsetti too. Alright, he would have been another option without being specifically for her, because he has no other use, because the unit is pre-banned all the time. So you're gonna pick this unit. People are gonna pre-ban Harsetti and not ever gonna get to use it. Opposed to he could be used against Harsetti, just like Young Senya. Let me talk about Young Senya before we come back here. Alright? Let's talk about Young Senya. Young Senya was a Harsetti counter, but because of how her passive works, she also was used against AoE. That's why Ran disappeared. Ran disappeared because of this girl, right? You can't AoE and she procs and she like your whole team almost gone, right? Because Ran is used with like cleave units, right? So he's used with cleave units, it's squishy teams, right? So if you eat one of those no bullyings, your team is almost dead, right? And then you push up and then you do whatever you want, right? You cleanse that whole defense break and everything, right? So yeah, that's like a good example of something that should work. It didn't help that much in RT, obviously, because they would either pre-ban Senya or they would pre-ban Harsetti, which in case you don't really pick Senya, and then even if they pick Ran on 3, you can still pick Young Senya, right? You can pick Young Senya if they go Ran on 3 or something like that, right? She has use other than Harsetti, right? She has uses, right? Opposed to Fenris. And another issue is they made it so it only affects PvP. So let me tell you, they don't want you to use them in the Harsetti Hall of Trials to make it easier. It's PvE, man. Just like let us use the thing, right? They don't want you to use it in PvE against Harsetti. And then you gotta understand too, a lot of newer players are gonna come into the game and they're gonna see people saying how OP Fenris is, versus Harsetti. They're gonna get to episode 5, they're gonna try to use it against the Harsetti boss and it's not gonna work. Alright? Things like that, right? Like so he's like double restrictive. He's only in PvP and only against one unit he works. That's why that wasn't a good idea, but you guys keep saying that it was. Like, stop that, right? It's not good. It's not good. And if they make him a Zio, they can make him either the same, like don't take away the 50% because obviously you don't want him to be too over Zeo, right? Make him either the same as Zeo, where him and Zeo maybe fight for speed RNG, or maybe you give him 15% instead of 20 or something like that, right? That way Zeo always goes first. Who knows? Or you give him 20 so they speed RNG themselves, right? I don't think there would have been an issue with that, right? Make it general use, and I think it would have been fine if it was like that. It's just because it was Harsetti's name in there. That's not a good design. Because you're basically admitting you made the unit too broken when her name is written in the thing, alright? So yeah, I think that's all. What am I missing? I think that's it. Yeah. Also, his buff is gone too. That's too funny. His buff is gone because it was tied to the EE. If they made a general use, I think they could have kept the buff as well. But they can't do what they do um, with how they had it before, man. No. Those of you who think it was a good thing, I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry, that's just wrong. Okay. Hope you enjoyed this one. Yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.